So it's always been the case. There's a war on everything. War on poverty, war on drugs, and so on. When you reflect a little bit, though, you come to realize the war is actually on you.
You're bringing drugs into this country so you can turn our brothers and sisters into addicts?
You want the streets of Bucharest to look like the streets of Detroit?
The CIA imports drugs so that they can destroy their black communities.
Now, there's also this realization that the more you push against something, the stronger that it becomes. A lot of this is like the Chinese finger trap, where when you're in the trap, you pull against it and you can't get out. But all it takes is a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a twist, and you are free. So those small hinges that Juan Savin talks about, what are those small hinges? The small hinge, I think, is actually you and me. You're the hero we've all been waiting for. But you have to get aligned with your own power. And part of that is getting rid of being sad. When you eat the standard American diet, you end up being more unhealthy than not. Why is that? Then you have work, which for a number of people is sitting all day. Again, sad. Now, if you look statistically, sitting really is detrimental to your health. Really, it's that inactivity for a long period of time. And although it's beneficial, obviously, to work out for an hour after the full day of sitting, you still need to have that incremental getting up and moving. Movement is life. Now, the next sad is saddled always with debt. Debt is just astronomical, and most of the time, it's using debt as servitude. And it doesn't matter if it's the house, the car, any number of things that cause you to be in debt in our consumer culture is just out there. So that's definitely a part of being sad. Now, what's particularly sad, of course, is the media, which is the subtle art of deception. All the news that you see, it's deceptive. They've flipped things on their head all the time. You think that it's the EPA and it's there to protect the environment, when in fact it's used to do just the opposite. Now, I know there's different arguments, all kinds of different things, like the FDA is there to help you. But trust me, when the government comes knocking at your door saying they're going to help, you better run the other way. Now, I know there's some people who are going to contend and go, the FDA is doing great things. The EPA, they're doing great things. But when you look at the effects of the planet as a whole, under these rulings, you realize, despite what they say in their verbiage, their actions have produced quite a different result. As some people have pointed out, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So we have these organizations, they've done their job, so to speak. The actions have been there, they haven't produced the result. Why do we keep going under these same systems? That's not the way to do it. Now, why continue under these same rulings? On a personal level, you can change all that. What that means is pulling away from the insanity of it all. Again, not doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So if the tools aren't producing the right result, what do? You zig when others are zagging. Now, how you zig where others zag, that's totally up to you. Tons of different ways to do it. But I think on a small level, there are ways of moving away from these sad dimensions of American life. Now, for me, one of the things I'm doing is I'm starting a new channel. This new channel is all about my transition to full-time RV living. Now, some of you might be rolling your eyes like, why would you do that? I believe that full-time RV living can actually be a tool for liberation in many different respects. It offers one of those journeys, those experiences for whatever length of time you might consider doing it. It offers a perspective on life that enables you to see things in a different way. One of the whole problems with all these tools is they've become ingrained within our lives on a daily basis. It's actually much harder to see what's going on when you live deeply within the culture. But when you take a certain aspect of that and you remove yourself from it, it's easier to see the different dimensions. And so that's what I see in full-time RV living, is that it provides a way to see the culture from a totally different perspective, and it gives you more control and awareness and fluidity. Fluidity is a huge part of it, so that you can not only have more experiences rather than things, but you can actually get to the heart of what you want to do in life. Now, that doesn't always happen, but for the most part, I think it can be a tool to alter your perspective. And so that's what I'm using it for. This new channel documents that transition from beginning stages through to doing it and beyond. Now, the other part of this journey is helping more people transition away from the standard lifestyle they've been under. So what I'd like to do is help more people make that transition to being an entrepreneur. And I think part of that puts people back into the driver's seat, so to speak, of their lives. And when you go through that process and you have that experience, I think there's something that happens where you kick in your entrepreneurial spirit. And that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is part of what created this country originally. And so by helping more people transition at least partially to being an entrepreneur, then we can bring that spirit back, I think, on a individual and collective level. And so that's what I'm really excited about, is helping more and more people make that transition into being partially an entrepreneur so that they can get the freedom from that, so that they have more of a chance to, let's say, make their own decisions rather than being always under the thumb of all these different control mechanisms. I think being an entrepreneur definitely gives you more freedom. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get more people to kind of get their hands into it. So in this, I'm a guide. I show you resources and I help you set up a system. The driver of this whole thing is a simple system. And once you set it up, it's learning from that and teaching at the same time. And those two together are with a particular audience or tribe. You're helping that tribe or serving that tribe, and they are actually helping and serving you at the same time. It's a kind of a co-creative experience that's very simple, but hard to do. Not many people actually do this because it's hard, not because it's complicated, but because it's hard to do. What happens is it's hard to trust yourself and it's hard to trust the system. There are shiny objects that come at you all the time. And really, it ends up being one of those situations where you start to go after the fancy camera and all these little doodads, so to speak, rather than just sitting down and actually using what you've got. You go after these, the next big thing, and thinking that you have to do this or that. At its core, being an entrepreneur, I think, is very simple, meaning you solve a problem and you sell that solution. You create a product, you sell the product. It's not complicated in that. And the system to do this isn't complicated either. But what complicates it is confidence, trust in yourself and trust in the system. And there's a lot of fluidity in this that makes it harder to do for the most part. What our culture has done, I think, for the most part, is a good job of keeping people thinking that things remain the same. They're changing all the time. You never cross the same creek twice. Everything is changing and it's dynamic. In the year of 2020, I think a lot of people realize this, how fragile our systems are, how easily they change. So the key is keeping it simple. You can start even without a website. You can use Facebook Messenger. At the core of this, though, serving your audience and they're serving you. It's a co-creative experience. So the whole idea is to start simple, start small, start simple, and build as you go. Now, in the description, there's a link. You can click it. You don't need any email required. And then when you do this, I'll give you a cheat sheet and a video walkthrough of the cheat sheet. At its core, it's very simple. But again, it's very hard to do because it's trusting that it's going to work and it's trusting yourself to do it. I think it's good to ask yourself, what are you doing to move away from sad? Some small way, moving away from sad, altering your diet, moving away from the media, moving away from debt, adding more movement to your life, whatever it might be. I think it's important to have some small effects that add up over time to larger results. As some have said, we overestimate what we could do in, let's say, a week, but very much underestimate what we can do in a year. You can definitely start something simple online that'll yield a result for you. And the more that you do this, the more choices you'll have in the future. It's not the end of the world if you fail at this or that along the way. It's just adapting and moving forward. And that's the whole idea of being an entrepreneur. There's so many people who talk about, 17 failures at this, 35 failures at that, examples of the light bulb. It took like 100 tries. so many people have said that that's true, and people nod and say, yes, I agree. When I found anyway, when I apply it to my own life, it's really hard to go through even one failure. Some people will disagree, but I think that's by design. Regardless on if it's intentional from our school system or not, the whole idea of failure has been somehow ingrained in with us that it's wrong to do that. It's not. You put yourself out online and, you fail and you keep going, and you fail and you keep going, and you fail and you keep going. It's the fluidity of a plan. And a lot of people see that and they nod and say, okay, well, that seems logical. But at the end of the day, it's really that hardness of being an entrepreneur, meaning it's really hard to go through those failures. But when you get a thick skin, when you're able to do that and be nimble and bounce back and really understand what to do differently the next time, it pays back in spades. I truly believe that more and more people need to at least develop some sort of side hustle and get away from relying upon one particular job, because that's where the control is if you are beholden to that. And there's other elements, definitely debt, that come into play that keep you leveraged in a particular situation. But regardless, having more mobility is going to help you, and having that fluidity is going to help you. The ability to kind of bend in the wind, as the bamboo tree does, gives you some serious benefit. And so it's looking at your whole setup and saying, okay, well, where could I, achieve more bend, more fluidity, more adjustability? That most of the time in our lives, if you are in an apartment or definitely if you're in a house, you have fixed costs, and you have so many of these fixed costs that they produce this line that you can't move. Whereas what attracts me to full-time RV living, let's say, is that line can be a lot more fluid. There's a lot more adjustability. And so in that sense, you're able to bend more easily. If this was helpful for you, be sure to give it a like. The whole design behind this is just to say, if you're feeling sad in the culture, that's by design. And there are things you can do incrementally to move away from many of these systems that are keeping us down.